Tarps Off Sports.
Okay, Frank Bonada here, and with me today is the Cage Warriors commentator, voice of the Octagon, Brad Wharton, coming off the Cage Warriors trilogy last weekend. What an event, and yeah, how's it going, man?
Yeah, it's going good, mate. It's you always have those post-show blues on the Monday after you've done an MMA event, you know, all the come down and the adrenaline dump and everything. So having like three times that from doing three shows in a row, it hits you hard on the Sunday. I tell you what, I spent most of that day on the couch, and yeah, it was well needed. But like you say, man, what a week of fights.
It really was. I mean, we'll go over it sort of chronologically a bit, but first, what was sort of your personal highlight? What fight stood out to you the most during that whole trilogy?
It's hard to pick one without kind of being unkind to the other guys, because I think there was some real efforts and some real like cool stories told. And obviously as a commentator, that's kind of what I'm into, you know, like telling these guys stories. I think you have to mention Matt Bonner. You know, I've actually written a piece on the three title fights that'll be out on cagewarriors.com today, and obviously talked about Matt Bonner in there. Now he's a guy I've been calling this fight since he was an amateur. You know, best part of a decade ago when he first started. You know, him and his twin brother fought on the show that I do up north in Bolton. They fought right after each other in matching shorts, so it was really confusing. I thought the same guy had come out twice. So, you know, following his story, and, you know, he had mixed results at amateur, but only fought the best guys. You know, didn't fight any bums, didn't pad any records or anything. So he came out of his amateur career with mixed results. And as we saw as a professional, you know, most of his fights on Cage Warriors, and he's fought tough guys every time there as well. And even when he's competed on the regional circuit, he kind of fought really, really hard to finish difficult guys. And it's crazy to think that 2 years ago, his record was 5-6-1. And now he's a world champion. You know, he moved up in weight, moved to next generation, which he's credited with turning his career around. And you know, to see him earn that title shot the way he did, beating Matt Inman, a legend of the UK scene, beating the former champ James Webb. You know, he finished James Webb quicker than Nicolas Frederick was able to do it, and we know how tough James is. So just to see the evolution of his game and just to see him get the title shot was cool. But to see him win, you know, he's got like the back page of the local newspaper in Warrington today, man. It's absolutely crazy. They said they're going to have to widen the door at the gym to get his head through. So yeah, that was sick. And obviously, you know, got to mention Ian Gary. The kid's an absolute superstar. You know, it's not really my place to go into all the stuff that's happening around that. I think, you know, what's been said has been said now, and that's for those guys to deal with. I've got a lot of respect for his coach, Chris, and I love Ian to bits. I hope they can figure something out. But, you know, if not, you know, let's all move forward. But, you know, the kid does what he says he's going to do. He's a world champ at 23. You know, you look at the other guys who've held that belt, they've gone on to Cage Warriors. A lot of them have gone on to the UFC, etc., or other places. A lot of them have been much more experienced. So he really does have the world at his feet, whether he gets signed straight away, whether he wants to defend the belt, whether he wants to go and fight for the middleweight belt. You know, he was keen on fighting Nicolas Frederick earlier this year. So, you know, who knows? But, you know, the world's his oyster. And obviously Joe McColgan, man, got to give a shout out to Joe. Been in the game for 10 years, absolute killer, fought nothing but the best. You know, only stopped by Mason Jones and Jai Herbert, and I don't want to meet the man who can take a clean shot from one of those guys. Except I have met him, and, you know, it's Joe McColgan. He was in there with both those dudes. To see him win the belt and the way he did it, just fantastic.
Yeah, exceptional. And we'll discuss all of those in a bit more detail in a bit. But yeah, I want to just go back to the headlining fight, Frederick versus Bonner of the first event. And what a start, you know, because like you say, Bonner is not, well, yeah, almost everyone was writing him off when going into that fight. You know, he was a decent underdog on the books, and anyone I spoke to, no one was predicting a Bonner win, at least on my side, like that I could see. And you know what? He almost arguably won every round. Like, I know Frederick, there's always a threat there that he could get that knockout punch, but Bonner looked like a savvy veteran, and use that wrestling to really take the fight to him. I know you guys sort of mentioned it on commentary, but Frederick almost seemed to like just sort of switch off when that submission came in. What did you think about that? Because he was starting to dominate. You know, you guys were mentioning he's been in that 5-round war, 5-round wars before. Bonner hadn't been there as much. It looked like he was dominating, and then Bonner slips out and locks up the submission. So yeah, what did you think about the whole finishing sequence, I suppose?
Yeah, it was a weird one. It was unexpected. It was
Mm,
definitely unexpected. I don't know whether it was a case of Nicolas maybe getting tired. You see, you've got a real sort of diametrically opposite way of wearing shots between those two guys. Like when Bonner was getting hit with the leg kicks and the shots, you could see the impact that was behind them, and obviously that's what judges are looking for. Nicolas, he must have been tired, but he just doesn't look it. He's like the Energizer Bunny. He will just keep swinging, and because he's so wild anyway, normally, like if you see quite a technical striker and they get into a brawl later on in the fight, the shots will look a bit sloppier, a bit more wild. Well, Nicolas is wild from the offset, so maybe you don't see it as much on him. But I think both guys by that point, they must have been tired. I mean, if one of them wasn't, then I don't know what they're putting in the water that they're having between rounds, but I'd love some of it to get me through the commentary. But you make an interesting point about the wrestling side of things as well. And I was talking to Ben Cartledge, who's one of our judges and one of the UFC's judges, elite level guy who judges all around the world. And he was talking to me about some of those rounds. We often talk after fights about the judging side of things, and he gives me advice and points things out that I might have missed. So it's a great learning tool for me. And what you're looking at with those rounds is there was especially at the beginning, there was a lot of high impact shots from Nicolas Frederick, but then Bonner not doing a whole lot with the takedowns until maybe the last minute of the round when he was getting some ground and pound. So really, you've got like 2 minutes of that fight where there's nothing to judge, because you're not judging control anymore unless effective strikes and effective grappling are even, which is very rare. So you're actually like maybe only judging 3 minutes of the fight. So it was even closer than it seemed watching it. But yeah, in terms of the finishing sequence, I guess it's a case of being mentally switched on can give you those advantages in the later rounds of a fight. You can't take your eye off the ball for a second, and whether Nicolas did that or whether he got tired, the fact is that Bonner was switched on and he was able to take advantage of that opportunity when it presented itself.
100%. And yeah, now we've got a new champion, which is just awesome. Such an awesome story. Just to go back, one more thing about Frederick is that a lot of people are saying, okay, a win here, that's a shot into the UFC. But after watching that fight, it kind of makes me feel like if he did go into the UFC, he would struggle against. I know middleweight's not really known for its wrestlers, but there are guys in that sort of upper echelon who are really legitimate. Look at Derek Brunson or something like that. I feel like that would have made him, it really would have been a problem for him. Should he get to the UFC, he'd probably do well with some knockouts maybe, but if he comes up against the high level wrestlers, that would have been a big problem. I don't know. What do you think about how he would have fared? I know it's sort of hypothetical now, but how he would have fared had he got into the UFC?
It's tough to say. I think one of the things to remember with Nicolas as well is that he's 38 years old.
Yeah.
And he came to MMA later in life. And can you imagine if Renegade had got hold of this kid when he was like 16, 17? With the physical tools alone that he has, you can teach everything else. I completely agree with you. I think at 38 years old, he had a very small window of opportunity to get to the UFC. Whether that's closed now, obviously you hope it's not, but it's going to be tough for him. He'd have to win the title, I think, and then realistically, it'd be a case of maybe a late pullout on a European card and him getting called up that way. He's not particularly tall. It's crazy because he's such a big dude. You have this like image of him as wanting to look up, but you see him next to Bonner at the weigh-ins, and remember Bonner's a former welterweight as well. Bonner's much taller, and as we know, you've got these huge guys in America who are taking 30 pounds off to make middleweight. I think he'd have struggled. It all depends on the matching, really. You look at a guy like John Phillips, and he can bang anyone out, but he got some unfavorable matchups, especially through this sort of COVID period. That they're in a situation where they just have to. The UFC have to produce content now, and they haven't really been building European guys up. You look at the guys who've come through Cage Warriors, the fights that they've been getting early going, the likes of Corey McKenna, Mason Jones, Jai Herbert, they're getting absolute killers off the bat because the UFC just needs fights at the moment. So, I think it may have been tough for Nicolas Frederick, but look, with a guy who's got that much heart and that much passion, you can never count him out. And we know he can switch dudes off. So, you know, who knows? Like you say, maybe hypothetical now, but I would have loved to have seen him get his shot and still would.
Yeah, 100%. I think you're spot on about saying the unfavorable matchups the UFC are making right now. I don't want to get too much off topic, but Jesus Christ, Jai Herbert with Renato Moicano and Francisco Trinaldo in his first 2 fights is ridiculous. But let's stick on Cage Warriors. The co-main event of that card, Christian Leroy Duncan versus Will Curry 2. Obviously, a little bit of controversy with the first one. Duncan rocking Curry with the flying knee, sends him staggering back with flurry of punches, and then referee steps in just as Curry sort of grabs a double leg, I think. And then so the immediate rematch, and it started off in a very similar manner to the first fight. I thought like the first round was pretty definitively Curry's, using that sort of wrestling. I know there was like a sort of heel hook attempt in there that looked really deep for a moment. And then second and third rounds, Duncan comes out and it looked like a different fight. You could show someone round 1 and show someone round 2 and round 3, and they'd be like, that's the same fight. It was just a wild ride to like watch the whole thing. So yeah, just what were your thoughts on that whole matchup and the whole saga of the first fight? The controversy surrounding the first fight, and then going into the second one.
Well, like we said about the UFC, not giving him any easy matchups. I think this trilogy series that Cage Warriors has put on, you've seen fights that you probably wouldn't have seen in other times. One of the best things Cage Warriors does is build prospects and build them the right way. But with Christian and with Will, they're two guys who, they may have fought lower level guys a couple of times and then maybe met in a title eliminator a year or so down the line. But they both wanted it. Both two guys with really different backgrounds. So Will does not have a massive amateur record. He fought a few times as an amateur, but he was a big ticket seller and he was promoted as a big draw on the regional scene round in London. You look at Christian's background, obviously trained under UFC veteran Mark Weir, one of the most experienced guys in the UK game. He wanted Christian to have a really long amateur career at a high level. So, Christian fought in Cage Warriors back years and years ago, like maybe like 6-7 years ago as an amateur. He's done the IMAFs multiple times and he's had the best part of, I think it's like 26 or 28 fights, I think, as an amateur. And so what you see with him is not a guy who's 3-0 or 4-0. You see a guy with 8 years of legitimate international experience, and he fights like that. And that's why he can end up in a situation like that heel hook, which, a couple of the judges around the cage, there's a BJJ black belt and a purple belt, saw that heel hook go on, and they're getting ready to put their pencil down because they think this is it. And we're all wincing at the commentary position as well because we know what kind of injuries that those moves produce. And then Christian comes out in the second round like he's never even been in the hold. So absolutely nuts. It's a really high level fight. Obviously, they had a bit of unfinished business. So, we've seen those prospects fight once in the pandemic, which you wouldn't normally have seen. Now we've seen it twice, which is very cool. And the crazy thing is, Will Curry could probably still be like the 4th ranked middleweight in that division, right? He's that good. I think Christian could probably fight for the title now or within one more fight. And Will, even though he's in this weird position now where he's 5-2, I guess, and has lost 2 on the row, let's say there's a middleweight title fight arranged for the next trilogy and the challenger pulls out, you wouldn't be mad about Will going in there because, he's at that level. So, 2 super talented guys and can't wait to see what's next for them.
100%. Yeah, future's bright for both of them, regardless of the result. I want to talk about Sam Creasy next, and not to skip past Liam Gittins because he put on a great performance against some Mez, but the flyweight tournament, I love it when Cage Warriors put these tournaments together, and what a performance from Sam Creasy. What I liked actually, so you had the 2 semi-finals. You had Sam Creasy versus Aaron Abbey, and you had Luke Shanks versus Leblanc, and they were polar opposite fights, ended up in the same sort of result decisions, but Sam Creasy's versus Aaron Abbey is just like a complete dominance essentially. I like Aaron Abbey. He's from Wrexham. I've got the flag behind me. Yeah, Sam Creasy just looked incredible. I spoke to him yesterday actually, and I mentioned that he goes out there in that sort of traditional karate or maybe taekwondo stance in it all. The samurai with the hair. He looks like the epitome of a traditional mixed martial artist. Or no, traditional martial artist. And he goes out there and fights like a bloody Dagestani wrestler, like literally picking up his opponent and throwing him around. Looked great on the feet as well, but it was the wrestling exchanges that really impressed me against Aaron. And he's going into the final now off a performance like that, and there's got to be a lot of steam and momentum behind him just
Yeah,
off the back of such
absolutely.
an impressive performance.
Absolutely. Like you say, two really different fights in the tournament. Sam's a guy who's been there, he's
Yeah.
fought for the title twice before, and third chances don't come very often. So I'm sure that kind of, and this was never meant to be a tournament. Obviously, when
Mm.
Jake Hadley was signed and relinquished the belt, that's when Cagey was like, right, we need a new champ. We've got four of the best guys fighting this weekend. Let's do it, and we'll have the final, I guess, at the next trilogy, which is September, October time.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm sure that was in the back of Sam's mind going into it. And he put on a consummate performance. Those repeated mat returns. He's going to have to be careful with those in a fight with a guy like Luke Shanks, where
Yeah.
he's not going to be the better wrestler. But it was obviously an area that he'd identified that he could outdo Aaron in. He maybe didn't want to spend too much time, playing the ground game with Aaron, but was happy to just kind of mentally break him down by just those repeated takedowns. They're not really scoring unless you do anything with them. You have to land strikes or get yourself into a position where you can put submission holds on. The takedown it's in and of itself doesn't score unless it's a huge slam and it does
Yeah.
damage. So he wasn't necessarily scoring loads with those takedowns, but as we talked about in commentary, it must have been wearing Aaron down mentally. The 18th time that you kind of picked up and dumped on the mat, it must be like, man, what have I got to do to stop this guy? But it was a consummate performance from Sam, and super happy to see him get the third opportunity at the title.
100%. And also the cardio, you guys picked up on that as well. He's still throwing him around in the third round, which bodes well going into a title fight at least.
Especially against Luke Shanks, right?
Yeah.
He's had a few 5-rounders now, and his the fight where he won the belt. It's a very wrestling heavy performance. So going to be interesting to see how these guys match up. I think Sam will have to fight a very different kind of fight against Luke Shanks. But with the experience he's got, I'm sure that won't be an issue to plan for him.
100%. And then the prelims of that first card. We won't go into detail, but that was pretty wild, wasn't it? 4 round 1 finishes, 1 KO, 3 subs.
It's great for me, because
Yeah, I bet.
I don't get paid by the hour. I get paid the same no matter how long the fights last. So when you've got 4 fights that have less than 15 minutes fight time, I had a nice break between the prelims and the main card. Look, it would have sucked if we had a crowd in and they had I think we had an hour and nearly 90 minutes or so to kill. It would have sucked for them, but it was nice to get a little bit of a break in. And when the action is fast and furious like that, you can't really complain.
Yeah, 100%. I turned it on 10 minutes too late, and there's only been one finish. But then switch over to day 2. We mentioned it earlier. Joe McColgan comes out against the former lightweight champion Sadar Ali. I was speaking to some of the other guys for Tarps off, saying Sadar Ali, that might well be his ticket to the UFC if he gets that win. If he put on something emphatic, and I was fully backing Sadar Ali, I'm not going to lie. No disrespect to Joe McColgan, but I thought this was Sadar Ali's time to shine. And Joe McColgan's he's pretty good, isn't he? Not a bad fighter at all.
He is very good. But the crazy thing about this for me is you look back to say the Donovan Desmay fight and how close that was, right? And that is genuinely probably one of the closest fights I've ever seen on Cage Warriors. And I really don't think you could be mad with the decision, and I don't think you could have been mad if it had gone the other way either. But the key thing for me after that fight was seeing both guys in the hotel later that evening and then the next night. Donovan was in a bad way. He was really he was limping really badly, and he looked like he'd been hit by a bus. Right, the guy looked like he'd just come out of a traffic accident. We saw Sadar Ali the next night, and he looked like he'd stepped off the runway. You know, his hair was good, didn't have a mark on him, and you would not know this guy had been in a fight. So when you're talking about damage being like, you know, the key criteria, maybe that fight, you know, obviously we're scoring round by round, but you know, cumulatively, that's not how the judges look at it. But in terms of morally, who won the fight, you know, maybe Sadari had a better shout than we gave him credit for, and that's how we've seen him fight in Cage Warriors. He's never been beat up before. He's never been in a position where you're like, oh my God, he's about to get knocked out, or he's really hurt here. And McColgan beat him up. It's as simple as that. He defended all the takedowns. He had Aggie shooting for takedowns like we've never seen before in Cage Warriors, and he beat him up. And that's the simple fact of it. So for Joe to go out and do that, absolutely phenomenal. I'm sure Sadari's story is not over yet. The guy's a martial artist and a competitor, and there's some big fights for him in that division. You know, there's a lot of guys. You know, you've got your Paul Redmonds, you've got your Mehdi Ben Lakdars, you've got your Stevie McIntosh, who's all coming off big wins. So there's lots of fights there for him. I'm happy to see Joe get this opportunity. He's talked himself about he's no spring chicken. I mean, he's a fair bit younger than me, but in fighting terms, he's no spring chicken. He's going to be 35 later this year, I believe. So he's kind of, it was kind of a now or never thing for him, perhaps. And obviously coming off, you know, losing to previous Cage Warriors champions a couple of times, you kind of think, is this going to be the last opportunity he gets? So super happy for him to get it. If you look on his social media, there's a great video of him going back to his gym.
Yep.
Honestly, man, I'm getting soft in my old age because it was getting very dusty in the room when I watched that. So super happy for Joe. What a performance. And like, I pray to the gods of violence that we get to see a rematch with Mehdi Ben Lakdar for the title in Ireland. How cool would that be?
Yes, most definitely, most definitely. And then, so obviously we actually did lose Ben Lakdar, who was initially meant to fight on that card against Redza. That's a shame, but the card still delivered. We had a bunch of undefeated fighters on there. Justin Burlinson, who went up against David Bear. And what performance from him. First round KO, second round KO, very quick. Looked incredible, to be honest, against a tried and tested veteran in Bear. He's what is he, 9-1, something like that. He's had a fair few fights, and he's looked good in nearly every single fight. That's the big thing.
Yeah, you know, David Bear's only been stopped by Gerard Al-Salawi, who's the former Brave champion, Cage Warriors veteran himself as well. Well, wasn't Jordan? He was one of the biggest stars back then. So yeah, Bear's really underrated. People just don't know about him, but he's a nightmare to fight. If you saw his fight against Nathan Jones previously on Cage Warriors, he's really suffocating. Burlinson, we've all heard how good he is. We've all heard the hype and everything, and we've seen him beat kind of lower level guys. But you always wonder when the dude takes a big step up in competition. Well, he took the test, passed it with flying colours. You couldn't have asked for a better performance. I don't think I'll be mad about seeing him fight Ian Gary for the title next. I think he's at that level.
Wow. Okay, that's big words. Yeah, it's not even a fight I considered really, but I'm not against it either.
He's 7-0. He's 7-0, right? 6-0.
Yeah.
Burlinson. Gary's 7-0.
Yeah.
So I mean, that's even.
Yeah.
I think. I don't think you could be mad at that fight.
No, not at all. We have some new brothers in Cage Warriors and MMA. The Hardwicks, Harry and George, both looked sensational. Such fun fighters. That's the thing that I really took from it. Especially George Hardwick's like liver shot TKO over Dean Truman was just brutal.
Yeah, that's a bad one.
Was that the fight that Dan Hardy was commentating? Not commentating, cornering, and then switching over.
Yes, it was. So Dean Truman fights out of Hardy Wallhead. So Dan was obviously, you know, he had double duty that night. He had to warm his fighter up. He had to corner. Then he had to kind of run back, put his suit on, and then come out. And obviously, you know, he's then commentating again with the same corner team that just beat his guy. But you know, Dan's a true martial artist and a professional, and you know, he congratulated the corner team on the victory. And you know, he said Dean will be in the gym Monday morning and Dan will be correcting the mistakes. I'm sure we've not seen the last of Dean Truman, but I think, it's always cool when you've got brothers on the same card. It's quite rare in MMA. Like I say, I called the Bonner brothers and they were twins. I called their fights back in the day, but you know, you look at, I guess, the Miller brothers and the Guerras, the Overeems. There's not been many over the years, so I think it'd be pretty cool. Obviously, the Figlacs we have on Cage Warriors as
Yeah.
well. I think they should do this all the time now. I think they should put brothers on the same card. In fact, look at the weight divisions. Could we have like a Hardwick versus Figlac like double team match or something?
Oh, imagine.
Yeah, right. I think Harry. I think George is a lightweight, right? And Harry is a featherweight. So maybe a little bit too small for the Figlacs, but who knows? Who knows? Get some burgers down one of them, and we can do it.
But yeah, they both looked exceptional. And then one thing I didn't really understand, I suppose, when you lost Ben Lakdar versus Redzer, why was Luke Shanks versus Nicolas Leblanc not bumped up to the main card? Because what a fight that was. I absolutely loved that. I was so excited about it as well. That was one of the fights that I really had like jotted down to be like, yeah, need to keep an eye out for that one. And what a fight it was.
Yeah, I mean, so the prelims for Friday night were ridiculous, right? I think you could have taken the prelims from that card, put a title fight on top, and that's the Cage Warriors card any day of the week. As for why things are moved, I don't know for sure, but there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes in terms of the placement of a fight card that people don't know about or don't often realize. So it could be that a coach in one of the corners is coaching two fighters or more on the same card, and they need time to come back, decompress, and then warm up the next fighter. So it could have been that the bout order wasn't moved for that reason. So it's easy to say, oh, stick another one in the main event, but that actually impacts the timings of everyone else. And obviously, the guys are given the timings, quite early on in the week. They kind of know when they're going to be on. Maybe they've got people tuning in at home and that kind of thing. David Bear is obviously French, and we have a French TV deal. And I believe I know previously they've not always taken the whole main card. They've kind of come in for the co-main event. So perhaps it was a case of we always had to have the Burlinson Bear fight in that co-main event slot. So I don't know for certain, but it could have been one of those reasons. It could have been that they just didn't want to move the card around. It could have been that, Luke Shanks has got a long drive home back up to the high level gym in Scotland and he wanted to get off. There's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes. But look, man, for me, it's all on Fight Pass. It doesn't really matter where things are.
Exactly. But yeah, incredible performance from Shanks. Really, really impressed me, and just got me so excited for that fight with Creasy. I know we've sort of gone over it already, but as a commentator, I suppose you have to kind of stay impartial. But who do you see? Who do you lean towards when just looking at that fight on paper?
I can't make predictions. I just it's something that I've always refused to do. Because it's just not fair. Obviously,
of course,
in my head, if it's a case of who am I going to put money on, I probably have an idea of that. But I think if ask me to make a prediction on a Bellator fight or a UFC fight, fine. But I think with Cage Warriors, you have to maintain that professional distance. At the end of the day, like the footage that we have of these fights, for this will be the legacy that guys show their children and their grandchildren, and I'd hate for someone to think that they couldn't do that because they thought the commentary was biased or because they'd heard the commentator had picked the opponent to win, and then they're just listening out for things that they think might be biased. So that's kind of why I don't do it. But look, what a fight is. You've got a guy like Luke Shanks who is kind of like the epitome of the modern day MMA fighter, right? Lives in the gym, just embraces the grind constantly. Smashes dudes around in training, gets smashed around in training, real hard-nosed guy. And then you've got the traditional martial arts background, the veteran who's been in the game for so long in Sam Creasy. Physically, they're built quite differently for flyweights. Creasy, the longer, taller guy, has fought at bantamweight a couple of times as well. Shanks, the more compact guy, you'd think have the wrestling advantage. Creasy, you would think, wants to keep this on the outside. So I think it's a great style matchup. It's going to be a really good fight. And I'm going to use the old cliche. Who's the winner? The fans.
Yay. Exactly. I couldn't agree more there. Yeah, this one's been going on for quite a while. So we'll end with Ian Gary versus Jack Grant. not to discredit William Gomez's victory over Tobias Harila, which was super impressive. I was really high on Tobias Harila after his last fight.
That's called the Ian Dean special. When Ian Dean picks a guy that like pulls a guy out of nowhere that you've never heard from before, and he comes in and takes out the top prospect. I mean, I've had conversation with guys who were like, Harila's the best featherweight in Cage Warriors, and you maybe struggle to argue that he wasn't prior to that fight based on what he's done previously. But then, you know, Gomez has maybe set the start on how to beat him. So it'll be interested to see how Harila adapts to that, how he comes back, because obviously there's a huge log jam at the top of that division now. You've got Paul Hughes, who's in effect the #1 contender. James Hendon's just won again. You've got Harila, who's still up there. You've got Gomez, who's still up there, and of course Vucenic and Sharia, who are waiting to have their fight that was supposed to happen this time. So, like, you could pull any one of those names out of the hat, and you'd have a decent challenger. Pull any two names out of the hat, and you've got a great main event.
What I really liked was after the fight, Harila comes out and said, "Look, no excuses. I lost the fight." And then, but it wasn't one of those where I've got no excuses, but here's my excuses. He said, "No excuses. I started fighting the wrong way. I started walking him down, and that's not right. You can't always do that. Sometimes that'll work against the lower level guys. Do that against someone who's a good counter fighter who can move well, and that's not going to work." I respect when fighters actually, he's not giving an excuse. He's given a reason, and that's it. And he's saying, "I need to work on that." So it's perfect.
You know, I saw his coach talk to Ian Dean on the bus on the way back to the hotel, and his coach was just like, "Yeah, we'll see you next time, and we'll be better next time." So I can't wait. Plus, the dude's absolutely terrifying. He gets the game. Like he understands the need to be a showman, and his coach said something really cool in the vlogs that Cage Warriors put out in the run up to fight week. His coach said, when you come out dressed like that and acting like that, you have to win. You have to put on a performance. So Harila is going to be under the spotlight next time, not just because he's a showman and a top prospect, but you can't be that guy that's all mouth and no trousers. You've got to back it up. And from what I've seen of Harila prior to Cage Warriors, he can back it up. So I'm expecting him to do something absolutely disgusting to someone next time out.
Most definitely. Let's talk about the main event of the trilogy. Essentially, that's what a lot of people are billing it as. Ian Gary, Jack Grant. This fight really got me hyped up. Like, I was more excited for this than the UFC event on the weekend than there was about 10 odd MMA events that weekend, but it was Ian Gary versus Jack Grant that I was really looking forward to. And then obviously we had the Team KF stuff that dropped, and like I said, we won't go into that, but it did sort of create a moment almost eerie when he walks out without a corner, without people around him. And I was just watching and like, whoa, this is like, feels like something I haven't seen before. He did have was it a fellow fighter in his corner, just like who he had
Paul
Hughes.
It was
Paul Hughes, was it?
Yeah. Obviously, they've had a bit of banter for years on, like who's the best prospect in Ireland kind of thing. And Hughes has obviously been there cornering Joe McColgan and Kieran Mulholland, who'd fought on the trilogy as well. Now, so luckily enough, Paul was actually staying in London until Monday. He was seeing some friends. But obviously, Ian Gary did turn up with no one in his corner. But you cannot go out to a fight without a second. And obviously, I know his manager was there with him, but you need a second. You need someone who's obviously knowledgeable and capable. If the towel needs to be thrown in, you've got to have someone who can do it and knows when to do it, who knows when to pull a fighter out of a fight, etc. Yeah, that's just a requirement. So, big up Paul Hughes for stepping up. Like the most successful cornerman of the weekend, apart from Paul Rimmer at Next Gen, I think. So, but yeah, it was eerie, wasn't it? It was very weird. We all said, after the fight, the commentary team were like, it was a weird atmosphere, a weird fight to call. I got like real mad butterflies. Like, I've been having a bit of a struggle with anxiety recently. I've had some health issues, and it's gonna be really bad anxiety, and I've really struggled going into this event. But I got some medication for it, and I was pretty much fine on the broadcast all week. And then my stomach started going before that one, like really bad butterflies. Then I turned around, Dan Hardy was stood up. He called the entire fight stood up. He took his microphone away from the desk. He could not sit down. He was pacing back and forth behind us. Like the atmosphere was that cool. And the fight, it wasn't a barnstormer, but I don't really think we expected that. Gary is, like, something I said about him on commentary, I believe, or at least in the run up to the fight, like, he's frustratingly good. He's one of those guys who's like, yeah, I'm going to go and do this, and then he does it. So he hadn't really been specific about, he obviously said, yeah, I'm going to knock the guy out, but he hadn't been like really specific about how he was going to approach it. I think he wanted to keep things under his chest. So, it's very interesting seeing a guy who we know probably have the better of Grant on the feet, and Grant probably the better guy on the ground. And there were just some weird exchanges, like, in the very last round where Grant said, he just said, I'm going to do something in a minute, and you're really not going to like it, and then rolled for that knee bar. Like, I've never seen anything like that in a fight before, and you wouldn't get that if we had a crowd in. So, like, as much as it would have been awesome to have that fight in Dublin, for example, where all Ian's fans could have been there, or somewhere in England, so Jack could have had a lot of support. Getting to hear that kind of stuff, that's like a unique experience. Look, Jack is by far the toughest guy Ian has ever fought. And you can't fault the guy because he keeps going and beating these guys. He's fought better opponents every time out, and he's looked a little bit better every time out. Very, very hard to look like a killer against someone as tough as Jack Grant, who's got 3 times more cage experience, takes a shot like an absolute champ. But, look, a fairly one-sided victory in terms of, the offensive output, a well-earned victory, and now Ian Gary's got the world at his feet. And look, don't write Jack Grant off. Like, I know he's had no luck in title shots, but the guys he's fighting have all been absolute killers. This guy's not done yet. He's and then we thought maybe after previous fights that he might be like, you know what, I'm going to take a step away. But he's back in the gym, and I know it was a weird fight, but I think we're going to see Jack Grant back, whether it's at lightweight, whether it's at welterweight. I think he's going to be in some really interesting fights, and whether he ends up in that kind of gatekeeper role to the championship, or whether he surprises us all, because he can just snatch a neck out of nowhere. I wouldn't be too surprised if we see him in another title fight.
Yeah, no, neither would I. Jack Grant, yeah, like you said, he is an elite competitor, and the highest level competitor that Gary has fought, which is why I thought it was so impressive that Gary goes out there and puts on. It's not a performance like his older ones. It was composed. It was controlled. When he's in those situations where Grant's rolling for heel hooks and leg locks and knee bars, he's staying calm. He's not freaking out. He's not, just trying to quickly get a ground and pound finish. He's, going through the motions, escaping, taking top control at times, like taking the fight to the ground and being comfortable in top control, which again, I thought was really impressive against someone like Grant. And obviously he calls for the UFC afterwards. I'm pretty sure he did that last time as well, but
he's been doing it for about 2 years.
Do you want to see him in the UFC? Do you want to see him defend? I mean, take away your commentator Cage Warriors bias. Would you like to see him defend the title, build his name a bit, get some more experience under the belt, or do you reckon he's ready to go straight up there and fight the best in the world?
Selfishly, obviously, I would love to see him on Cage Warriors because that means I get to call more of his fights. And look, he is a super nice guy. Like, he's infectiously nice. I really, really like the kid. Like, on a personal level, I think he's super cool. So I like hanging out with him, and I like talking to him after fights and stuff. Plus, he always buys loads of pizza and gives it to people. So, that's great after a fight. So I would love to see him hang around the Cage Warriors. I think, for me, I think if you're moving on to the UFC, you should have at least 10 pro fights behind you. I know the UFC are signing guys now who are like 2-0 or 2-1 or whatever. Yeah. But I think second chances at the UFC are very, very rare. And I think you cannot buy that kind of experience that you can get on Cage Warriors or the American equivalent or the equivalents elsewhere in the world before you hit that UFC level. Because especially considering what we talked about earlier, they're not giving people easy fights at the moment. If you go up there and you're not ready and you end up losing a few and getting cut, it can be a long way back. Now, fortunately, Gary's young, so he's got plenty of time to develop. So whatever he decides to do, he does have time on his side, and that's the most important thing. Do I think he can be competitive in the UFC right now? Absolutely. He's that good. He's definitely that good, and he's got star quality to match. You know, that I'm sick of hearing the comparisons to Conor McGregor. I understand them and I've made them myself, but now they can end because he's carving out his own path and he's becoming his own person. Now he's got something crucial that he needs to do very, very quickly. We talked about obviously the Team KF stuff. Whether that can be resolved, I don't know, but he needs a team behind him. He's got to have that structure in place. Now we see fighters sometimes build a team around themselves. I would say for a young guy, that's maybe the wrong way to go, and he needs to join an established gym where he's got that coach figure who can say, "Look, no, I'm telling you, you do this, you don't do that. I've been in this game for 20 years. I understand it better than you think you do." I think every young fighter, Ian Gary or anyone else, needs that behind them. So I think the next few months are going to be crucial in terms of getting that structure in place. You can have all the talent in the world. Look at Mike Tyson. Would he have been Mike Tyson without Custamato behind him, focusing him, channeling him? Nah, absolutely not. So I think it's crucial for Gary to get that sorted. But like I said, time on his side, and I really genuinely think of all the guys who've come through Cage Warriors in recent years, he's one of the ones with one of the highest ceilings in terms of his ability to be a star and his actual tools in the cage.
Most definitely. I mean, he's nicknamed the future for a reason. Thank you so much for coming on, Brad. I think we'll wrap up there because I've had you on for quite a while now. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but thank you so much for coming on. Really appreciate it. Yeah. And if there's any sort of shout outs or, if you want to let people know where to find you on social media and all that, please go ahead.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at MMABrad48. I think I've got an Instagram, but I never use it. But I will talk to pretty much anyone on Twitter. So hit me up if you want to chat fights or sumo wrestling or Vimto or old rock music or new dance music, because that's pretty much all I talk about. So yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it. Always happy to take the time to talk MMA and Cage Warriors. So yeah, we'll maybe do this again after the next one.
Most definitely. Cool. Cheers, man.